Hi, everybody. This is Pastor Ryan Radke coming to you from Messiah Lutheran Church in Mechanicsville, Virginia. Welcome to this week's midweek message. We spent the last 5 weeks on a one chapter wonders tour, looking at books of the Bible that were only one or two chapters long. And so, having been in the Bible for a few weeks, I'll switch gears to more of a book study, a sampler platter, if you will, over the month of June. Calling this Lutheran Stories, really simple. Um, 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago now, was the 500th anniversary of the Reformation, and there was lots of fanfare and celebrations and things back then, and there was a lot of things written and published back then too. One of them, well, I'm going to use two of them for the next couple of weeks. The first one came out right around then. This one came out in 2016, so right ahead of it. It's called Together by Grace, Introducing the Lutherans. It's edited by Catherine A. Kleinhans, and it's got lots of different contributors to it, little essays about Lutheranism back in the day, what our theology is, where we're heading now, Lutheranism around the world, things like that. The other one is called Stories from Global Lutheranism, a Historical Timeline. This is by Martin J. Lorman, who was a seminary classmate of mine. He was a senior when I was in my first year. Um, and This is a collection of short essays of kind of key Lutheran personalities, events, different pieces. These were collected leading up to that 500th anniversary of the Reformation, and then later published into this book. And this was published in 2021, so this one's pretty new. So just going to share one essay, one short bit from each of these each week in June. And I'm not going to add too much to it. I'm going to try to let them speak for themselves. But hopefully you'll pick up on some things that are new to you or just to hear some things in a new way. I thought I'd start on kind of a really broad view with the Lutheran World Federation. First off, we're going to start with the founding of the Lutheran World Federation from this book. I should say Martin J. Lorman is Associate Professor of Lutheran Confessions and Heritage at Wartburg Theological Seminary, where he teaches courses on history and missiology, which is missions and things like that, Lutheran theology, and global Christianity. So this is 1947, founding of the Lutheran World Federation. In the aftermath of World War II, Lutherans around the world came together to provide aid, help resettle refugees, and foster stronger relationships with each other. Building on the foundation of the Lutheran World Convention that had met after World War I, the Lutheran World Federation came into being at a meeting in Lund, Sweden, in the summer of 1947. Four priorities set the tone for both the LWF's early years and its later directions: rescue for the needy, common initiatives in mission, joint efforts in theology, and a common response to ecumenism. So ecumenical stuff, working with other branches of the Christian family tree. The humanitarian crisis was especially pressing because in the war's aftermath, about 10 million Lutherans were refugees forced from their homes. Early LWF leadership came mostly from Scandinavia and North America, as well as from German theologians who had publicly resisted the Nazification of the Church. The first president of the LWF was Anders Nygren, a Swedish successor to the ecumenical legacy of Nathan Soderblom. Sylvester Mickelfelder of the American Lutheran Church had become a respected leader in the U.S. government's post-war relief efforts. He led the organization of the Lund meeting and coordinated LWF's budding humanitarian aid programs. Hans Lilje, Bishop of Hanover, had supported the Barmen Declaration that was part of those who resisted among the church in Germany in World War II, and been imprisoned for his resistance during the war. He was elected LWF's second president at the 1952 assembly. Another influential leader who served on early executive committees was Eivind Berggrav, Bishop of Oslo, who had organized church resistance against the pro-Nazi Quisling regime in Norway and was imprisoned from 1942 until the end of the war. For Berggrav, Luther's legacy had not been one of indifference or obedience in the face of political injustice, but rather one that inspired an obligation to resist. As he later recalled, it was a joy to sling Luther in the face of the Gestapo. His theology was our best weapon in the fight against the Nazis. In the following decades, LWF assemblies gave increasing attention to issues of gender equity and global representation. The 1957 assembly in Minneapolis included a resolution from the Committee on Women requesting female representation on all commissions, not only on those related to women and children. The 1963 assembly in Helsinki received requests from African and Asian churches that Lutherans more intentionally bridge the gap between Reformation-era theology and the diverse global contexts of the 20th century. One early step toward that goal was support for Radio Voice of the Gospel, a radio ministry that the LWF had launched earlier that year in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. At its peak operation in 1972, Radio Voice of the Gospel offered 20 hours of programming a day in 20 different languages. International politics continually impacted the Lutheran World Federation. Plans to hold the 1970 assembly in Weimar, East Germany, fell apart due to the strains of the Cold War. As Lutherans around the world continued to gain independence from colonialism after World War II, a new dynamic between the global North and South was developing. To increase the visibility of the church beyond the North Atlantic, Lutherans in Brazil invited LWF to hold the 1970 assembly there, instead of Weimar. Concerns about the military dictatorship ruling Brazil at the time, however, led to a third change in venue, to Evian, France. This concern over the assembly setting mirrored the increasing awareness among LWF members about the need to honor the geographical and cultural diversity of a truly global Lutheran community. More about this will be said in a later section discussing the 1977 LWF assembly held in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. From its modest beginnings in the rubble of World War II, the Lutheran World Federation has grown into a communion of international churches. Members share altar and pulpit fellowship, which means they fully honor each other's ministries and teachings. This is true even though some Lutheran churches around the world do not ordain women, and despite continued disagreements about sexual orientation. As Katherine Johnson has observed, LWF's long-term ability to maintain unity amid these significant differences remains to be seen. After being led mostly by men from North Atlantic countries, leaders of recent decades have included Josiah Kibira of Tanzania, Ishmael Noko of Zimbabwe, Gottfried Brockemeyer of Brazil, Munib Yunan of Palestine, Martin Jung of Chile, I'm not sure if I did that right, and Panti Philibus Musa of Nigeria, who was elected General Secretary at the LWF's 12th Assembly, held in Windhoek, Namibia in 2017. That was for the 500th. To date, no women have been elected to the offices of President or General Secretary. Nevertheless, women hold other leadership roles throughout the LWF, which, quote, works toward the full participation of women in the communion's life and pursues this commitment at all levels of LWF, end quote. Germany remains the nation with the most Lutherans, but because German churches that belong to the Lutheran World Federation are organized by region rather than nation, the 5 largest LWF member churches are in Ethiopia, Tanzania, Sweden, Indonesia, and Denmark. Of the approximately 80 million Lutherans in the world, about 90% belong to churches that are in the Lutheran World Federation. As of 2016, LWF had 145 member churches in 98 countries. The original emphasis on humanitarian aid, especially care for refugees, continues to serve as a major focus of the LWF's work. Quote, the LWF has been the largest faith-based partner of United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in 2015, providing assistance for more than 1.3 million refugees in more than 30 countries. Quote. LWF was also founded to provide Lutheran representation in international ecumenical efforts. To that end, it has shared a building in Geneva with the World Council of Churches since the founding of both groups in the 1940s. The groundbreaking Luneburg Agreement between Lutheran, Reformed, and Union churches in Europe in 1973 paved the way for further cooperation between Protestants around the world. It included a shared statement about the Lord's Supper that reconciled many of the Eucharistic debates of the Reformation era. Other ecumenical and interfaith dialogues at the LWF level have included the 1999 Joint Declaration on the Doctrine of Justification with the Roman Catholic Church, statements renouncing the anti-Jewish writings of Martin Luther, and repenting of the Lutheran role in the Holocaust, a 2010 apology to Mennonites for persecution against Anabaptists, and ongoing international dialogue with Orthodox, Baptist, Pentecostal, and Muslim communities. There's your first one. Part 2, which is written actually by somebody referenced in the first one, This one is written by Katherine Johnson. Let me get you her information. Katherine Johnson, one more page, is Director for Ecumenical and Interreligious Relations in the Office of Presiding Bishop of the ELCA. From 2007 to 2011, she was Assistant General Secretary for Ecumenical Affairs at the LWF Communion Office in Geneva. She also for many years taught historical theology at Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary. This one's called Gifts and Tasks of Our Larger Lutheran We. What the Lutheran World Federation means for the ELCA. It's our denomination. ELCA members are accustomed to think about their local congregation, about their synod, and about the work of the national church. In addition to these expressions, though, through the Lutheran World Federation, they belong to a communion of 145 churches in the Lutheran tradition throughout the world. On behalf of 72 million people, almost 95% of the world's Lutherans, the LWF strives to address human suffering and injustice, to deepen relations among its member churches as they engage in all aspects of holistic mission, and to participate in dialogue with other Christian traditions and in collaboration with other faith groups, while also developing Lutheran theological insights. In all these activities, the ELCA actively contributes and at the same time richly receives. While the LWF is not itself a church, it expands both experience and understanding of what it means to be Christ's body. At a time when global is a word of urgency and promise, the LWF deepens worldwide connections and provides a platform for common action. As its name, Federation, still indicates, the LWF began in 1947 as a loose membership organization, with an emphasis on common response to needs in the aftermath of World War II. While that special attention to refugees remains important for the LWF, it has increasingly described its life as a journey to closer relationship, a, quote, spiritual journey, where God's Spirit allows us to listen to one another and share our joys and sufferings in solidarity, interdependence, and mutual responsibility, quote. Experience with this common life prompted the LWF to declare itself a communion of churches in 1984, in part to support a call to accountability for those churches supporting the apartheid ideology in Southern Africa. More recently, this emerging identity has allowed the LWF to take crucial communion-defining actions on behalf of its member churches together, actions that drew upon initiatives in the United States and other local settings, but then raised them to global significance and prominence. Two of these actions have been recognized as important, not only for Lutherans everywhere, but for the whole Christian church in its quest to heal its divisiveness. First, as you just heard, in 1999, the LWF and the Roman Catholic Church signed the Joint Declaration on the Doctrine of Justification. This common affirmation of God's gracious initiative recognized that on this topic so crucial to Lutheran beginnings, the two parties no longer see the need to condemn one another's teachings. That's nice. In 2010, the LWF Assembly publicly expressed its deep regret and sorrow over persecution of Anabaptists and Mennonites by Lutheran authorities, and especially over the theological support for this persecution offered by Lutheran reformers, which had remained unaddressed until our own time. If you're not familiar with that part of Lutheran history, the Lutherans and Catholics were going after each other a lot in the early years of the Reformation, but both of them came down hard on the Anabaptists, which also became another, not denomination quite, but another line of theology, another line of Christian witness during that time. And some of the responses weren't just mean or critical, but became quite violent. Together, these actions have prepared the way for the extraordinary transformation in tone that marks, at the time it was written, the upcoming 500th anniversary of the Lutheran movement in 2017. In witness to transformed relationships, Pope Francis joined in inaugurating a year of common commemoration in Lund, Sweden, birthplace of the LWF, on October 31st, 2016. This symbolic act builds upon the careful theological work of the Joint Declaration and the repentance of the 2010 Mennonite Action, which showed the renewal of spirit that can come from claiming the gifts of forgiveness and reconciliation. As LWF General Secretary Martin Jung said in announcing the Common Prayer in Lund, "I'm carried by the profound conviction that by working towards reconciliation between Lutherans and Catholics, we are working towards justice, peace, and reconciliation in a world torn apart by conflict and violence." Another important benefit of communion identity is the forum it provides for Lutheran churches together to experience the gifts of their rich diversities. Like all of world Christianity in recent decades, the LWF has experienced a shift in the balance of its membership toward the global south. The ELCA, the second largest member church in the LWF as recently as 10 years ago, is no longer among the largest five. To be sure, the ELCA engages partner churches around the world in many ways, from congregational initiatives, companion synod relationships, and the many activities of its global mission unit. Yet it is important that these bilateral relations are complemented, that's the PLE, like work together kind, complemented by settings in which ELCA contributions enter into multilateral collaborations. So it's not just us doing stuff for other people, it's actually collaborations. In public witness on such issues as climate change, in service to the suffering, and in theological exploration. The Global Young Reformers Network and the Women on the Move project are two examples of opportunities to engage global diversity as 2017 approaches at the time. Again, they're still going. Joining in such projects as one important voice among many others is in itself an expanding experience. Through the LWF, the ELCA can augment its ministries beyond what is possible as a single church, and in particular as an American church, with the opportunities and burdens that identity brings. The LWF speaks of communion, like other dimensions of Christian unity, as both gift and task. The dimensions of gift, both from gratitude for God's grace and from the experience of relationship, are obvious and multiple. Yet, communion is also task. If God's call is to the unity that honors difference, it is not possible to turn away from those relationships when the differences call for the hard, shared work of respectful listening. Questions around who can be ordained, for example, are answered in multiple ways among LWF member churches, and so far, these churches have remained in communion. As such challenges and issues arise, the LWF provides places for shared worship and collaborative action, which underline that the opportunity to engage difference is itself gift, even when the task aspects seem more pressing. As the ELCA experienced 2017 and beyond, it has much at stake in participating with the LWF and the ongoing work of self-definition for faithful witness in changing circumstances. Whatever changes or challenges arise, it can fully affirm the vision its world body seeks to embody, liberated by God's grace, a communion in Christ, living and working together for a just, peaceful, and reconciled world. If you want more information on the LWF, you can visit www.lutheranworld.org. I realize I just read to you like 6 pages. Maybe that's not what I'm normally doing with these. We're throwing some things out there, some questions. We're doing Bible study. We're doing live Zoom recordings of a discussion around Bonhoeffer, some of the different things we've done. But, I'm guessing maybe you don't have these books on your shelf. So hopefully that you'll get a little something out of them and just stop and think for a moment about what it means to be just an individual or part of something bigger, whether that's your family, your congregation, your denomination. Think of the things that the ELCA can do that an individual church couldn't, like camp ministries, campus ministries, relief efforts, starting new churches. When we combine all our efforts, we can make these things happen. And now take that another degree of expansion bigger to the LWF. I've had the chance to visit other areas of the world where Lutherans are around. I've also had the chance to have people from other parts of the world join me and others at seminary, learn together side by side. I can't tell you the lessons I learned from them. They come from a different perspective. It helps me check my own assumptions, but it also teaches me so much about attitudes, about theology, about context. We benefit so much by being in a part of a bigger communion. It's like God was onto something with this whole body of Christ thing. So check out the Lutheran World Federation. See some of the work they do. Check out some of the member churches. If you get back to traveling now that travel restrictions are getting lifted, you could still go to church on a Sunday, even if you're visiting some other country. Maybe it'd be a neat experience. Maybe with everybody online during this pandemic, you could find a Lutheran broadcast from some other part of the world, you might not know the language, but I'm guessing it'll still be a little bit familiar. There's a lot of opportunities here. So I just wanted to give you this springboard, this jumping off point, share a little bit with you about the history and the kind of current direction of the Lutheran World Federation. And I hope that you can um, take the springboard and jump off of it and see what else you can find. I'd love to hear what it is that you discover and explore. So let me know. And next week, we'll do something a little different. We'll be talking about how faith is lived out in the world and some of our current challenges, and also um, a little bit of history that we could learn from too. I think that's it. Thanks for tuning in. We'll do another duo of Lutheran stories next week. Uh, take care. Look after one another, pray for one another, and I hope you learned something this week. Till next time.